Hey everyone, RJ here. Today, I'm excited to bring you guys a new 3-part series on developing a website from design to working code. I'm expecting this series to be fairly beginner friendly, so as long as you have some slight knowledge of HTML and CSS, you should be good to go. We also won't be using any CSS frameworks like Bootstrap, so the code should be fairly easy to follow as well. On the screen currently, we have the end product, which is this awesome, fully responsive landing page for a snowboarding company. This is what we'll have created by the end of part 3. Now, as we move and scale this from desktop to tablet to mobile, you can see the design responds nicely. And I'm excited to show you guys what this is about, my approach to implementing it, and not really sure why I picked a snowboarding company, but I think it came out pretty nice. So, first thing on the to-do list for today is to have a little design talk. Just a side note, we are now in Adobe XD. This is a design software that I use personally, and this is the landing page we were just looking at in design form. One thing that I have learned over time with creating websites and different kinds of web apps is that planning is extremely crucial. My hope for this series would be to show the process that I use to create a minimalistic web page without too many headaches, because don't get me wrong, there's always going to be bumps in the road, but the goal is to avoid as many of those bumps as possible. So in this first video, we'll be going over how to interpret a design, understand it, plan properly to get the programming portion done as efficiently as possible. Planning is very important for anything in programming, but with website development, it will save you a lot of time if you have a well thought out design and a general structure for how you intend to code up the design. There's a few starting paths you may be at. One may be that you have created the design yourself, or maybe it was given to you by a designer. Both ways are perfectly good, but the main message I'm trying to get across is that it's important to understand what the designer had in mind when creating the design. So, fair warning, I am not a professional designer by any means, but I do like to design in my free time. I made this snowboarding landing page to essentially mock a possible landing page for a snowboarding company. You can see on the left, there is a cool snowboarder graphic that I created in Photoshop, and on the right, we have our actual text content. So we have a navbar, a heading, a subheading, paragraph, and a button at the bottom. I'm not going to go into too much detail on why I chose to design things the way I did, mainly just because this is a programming video. But if you have any questions, let me know in the comments or send me a message and I'll try to respond. So with this design, I intend for the content on the right to move over the image on the left as the screen width gets smaller, just as we saw in the browser version. I would also like the snowboarder on the left to only be visible on desktop. So when thinking about and understanding how the design should respond to desktop, tablets, and mobile, it's very important to consider this because now we know like this snowboarder will only be showing up for desktop, not tablets, and not mobile screens. So thinking about things like this ahead of time and knowing them is extremely important, and it allows you to plan better when it comes down to structuring elements within the code. When developing websites or web apps, you'll hear a lot about responsiveness, and it truly is important to make your website look good on different devices nowadays because you have so many people accessing sites from mobile devices, laptops, desktops. You need to make sure that your site looks good on each of those different platforms. So now is probably a good time to start breaking down these different elements of the design. And with some video editing magic, I'll add in some fun boxes to highlight the areas I'm talking about. So to get started, something we've already talked about a little bit is our cool snowboarding image. We know that this large image will only be appearing for desktops and laptops. It looks very cool and is a spotlight of the design. But our content on the right is also equally, if not more important. It's what is going to be driving traffic to the rest of our website. So surrounding this content is going to be our container. Our container holds all of these little different components. The first being our navbar. Within the navbar, we have 4 different nav options, being home, about, products, and contact. In terms of code, we may think about using a flexbox here to space our elements evenly. For those who may not know what a flexbox is, it's a very useful property for aligning elements within a div, especially when you have multiple elements within a div that need to remain spaced properly when changing width. This idea goes hand in hand with responsiveness. Next is the snowboard heading. This heading sticks out because it's bold, it's red, and it has this chevron image to its left. These are important properties that we'll have to add when creating the element. And the image to its left is an SVG. That is a scalable vector graphic, which essentially means that as we scale this up, this image will remain sharp, no matter how big it gets. So you can see there's no blurred lines at all. This is very important because it really allows us to have high quality graphics and images on the website. We can just make that small again. Perfect. Okay, great. So just like the navbar, the heading and the image will both be located within a div. Positioned slightly underneath the heading, we have a subheading. Positioning all of these elements in a stacked sort of way makes things very manageable and maintainable if you ever need to make changes in the future. Next, we move on to the paragraph, and this is some lorem ipsum text. It's just filler text that you can generate on a lot of different websites. And there are 2 large gaps that you can notice at the top and the bottom, and also the line height is slightly increased a bit for readability. Lastly, we have the Explore button at the bottom. The Explore button is composed of a few different things: the text, the arrow, and the underline. The way I would approach this would be to put the Explore text and the image within a flex div. And as we had talked about earlier, flex is very powerful because it allows us to space elements nicely within a div without too much hassle. And now, tackling the underline, there are many ways to go about this. Some people may opt to use an image, maybe an HR element with a small width, or maybe even a div with a background color and short height. But for this, the way I would approach it would be to add a border to the bottom. That's one of the great things about front-end development in general, is that it allows programmers to be very creative with the many ways they can choose from to accomplish a similar goal. The idea behind going over this design before we code it, though, is to figure out and decide what way we want to achieve and tackle those goals. It's something that I've learned after practice and many hours of just slightly tweaking CSS over and over and over again versus really hammering out those details beforehand. And doing that saves so much time, and in a business setting, saves money as well. Anyways, that wraps up the first part of this 3-part series. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and were able to take something away from it. Now in the next video, we'll code up this landing page, and if you guys have any questions, please feel free to message me or comment below. Also, please give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. It helps the video rank higher within the mysterious YouTube algorithm, and also lets me know if you enjoyed the video. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 2.